Try again. Hey guys, welcome to the stream. Um, it's good to see you. It's, Happy New Year. It's the first stream after the New Year, and excited to get into it. Just a lot of things going on, both personally and with streaming and stuff like that. So I'm excited, looking forward to the new year. Hey, I want to be a developer. What's your good news? Happy to hear it. It's a great way to start the new year, just with good news. It's always the best way to start. Um, so yeah, man, share your good news. But anyway, um, last time when we were looking at the grid, uh, getting into it, uh, there was this interesting situation, the undo redo. Oh, dude, you're so lucky. So very lucky. You should follow that totally, man. Should invest in all the crypto she asks for. Um, it's totally not a scam. Um, did you guys see? Oh, there was a famous Chinese streamer, and during her stream, her face filter failed, and she lost like I don't even remember how much of her audience, because of her face filter failing. It was crazy. True level win. Exactly. But anyway, I hope my face filter doesn't fail. Anyway, uh, I figured out what the problem was after some thought and stuff. I wanted to come back and work on it on Thursday. Thursday, I spent the entire day with my daughters, and Um, after the new year, I just like to spend some time with both my daughters while they're still out of school and don't have a whole bunch of dance stuff going on. Um, that's a crazy thing about this time of year. Both my daughters are dancing quite a bit, um, and my oldest, she just had a competition last night, and she was super excited because she got moved to the front row of a dance for her team. Very exciting for us. We were really excited to see it all. Um, yeah, it's a busy time of the year, so I like to just take some time when we have some time and just go spend it with them. So I went and got pedicures, which I enjoy. Um, but yeah, it was a good day. Anyway, I thought about it for a bit and realized what the problem is. And we can reproduce it right away. If I just hit redo right now, and I just go 1, 2, 3, when we undo this last cell isn't being undone, right? More, if I hit 2, 3, 4, and we undo, 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 notice that we don't go backwards past the 2. And I hit undo a few extra times. So here, if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If I do undo, we will never get rid of the 1. And even if I change this to like a 4, 5, 6, right? As we undo, you'll see that because I keep hitting this undo button, and it works the same way with the undo or the redo. So, if I come here and I hit undo a few times, we hit 1. As soon as I hit undo, that 1 will never go away. And it's the same with redo. If I hit it and then I, enter a 1 and I hit undo, the 1 will never go away. So obviously there's a problem with our implementation, right? So what could that problem be? So I started to think about it. And the problem becomes apparent when you look at this diagram, right? So we get set into this user input state, right? And if we hit the undo button or the redo button, we immediately jump into this state where we're in the no op handler, right? And the no op handler does none of the handling that any of the other handlers do. Well, that the update handler does, right? So it doesn't update, the stack. It doesn't update any of the other stuff. And that's our problem, is that we're doing our undo too early and our redo too early because it's sitting there waiting for data to pass, right? Or input to the input back to the grid, but there is no input in this state. And the reason for that is that we don't have anything on the stack, right? There's nothing to redo, there's nothing to undo. So we just sit there waiting. And so when the user goes and enters something, it's treated like an undo. And so we ignore all stack updates, right? And so then the undo and redo stack get messed up and get clobbered. So how do we get around this, right? One thing that I thought about was, well, what if we put a flag on here? And that winds up being a problem. We don't want these, we don't want if statements with our state machine. Let's rephrase that. We want to avoid as many if statements as possible, right? Allow our state machine to do what it does. But so adding a flag, kind of defeats the purpose of doing this. And, in that point, we may as well just undo the state machine and just add the if statements around, updating the stack and things like that. I don't like adding flags to my state. I don't like adding flags to my commands. It just, they're often abused. They're often more difficult to track down. They often lead to more testing cases, right? And the interesting thing about flags is, the flags aren't usually like a linear or even, like a linear progression, right? They're almost always exponential, because typically you'll have an if statement for your flag, and then you add another flag, and then you have an if statement nested inside of that if statement for your flag, or and the more if statements you add, your number of test cases grow exponentially. So yeah, Michael, good to have you here, man. And I was on the wrong stream, so Happy New Year. Prepare for a year of trolling. Absolutely. Jason's filter fails and he's three guys in a trench coat. Yes, I am. I'm definitely three guys in a trench coat. What if we put a flag on here? Yep. Neil Armstrong put a flag on the moon, and suddenly everybody denies that we even went to space. I mean, that's the problem with flags, you guys. I don't like adding flags to my state. Thank you, Michael. Definitely starting out the year with some good dad jokes. So appreciate that. Anyway, getting back into it, right? We're looking at what could have happened, and how do we fix it? And so if we go look at our code, as soon as we hit the undo, right? As soon as we get into this undo statement, we immediately patch the state with the no-op handler. And then we check, right? We grab the command stack in the last command run. We grab an index off the state. And if the index is less than 0, we just immediately return, right? Which means that this handler is never set back. So we could come down in here and we could reset the handler, but that's not the right way to do this. Instead, the best way to do this is to move our command, or our handler, right, our state change, we move our state change to where we're actually going to do the update, right? And in fact, we could actually move it down here. Because this is where we actually update the cell value. And this will help us because now our state patching only happens when we know we're going to get a value. And we could do the same thing here. So again, we've moved our state patching. That's interesting. Why isn't my prettier running? Or is it just slow? We'll watch that. Anyway, so now we've got the patch happening, but notice that we've got these two things going on, right? We're patching the state with the, we're setting the no-op handler, we're updating the cell value, right? And then we're running the index. So there's some opportunity here to potentially, make this happen the same way, because this is basically the same thing, right? Patch state, update the cell value, and then we change the current command index. So how do we do that, right? And one way we could do it is by adding more methods. And that's a possibility. Another possibility is that we add a function here that we call it like the no-op update. And then we work through that. And the reason that we would need to add another with methods, and that's probably the way I'll go. So with methods, and here we're going to grab our state. And we are going to add our, let's add, hey, thank you for the Nivek, Dev, thank you for the raid. Really appreciate it. Welcome everybody. If you're new here, come on in, have some fun, and just ask questions. That's one of the things. Don't feel bad about interrupting me. I enjoy being distracted, and maybe that's my thing, is that I'm easily distracted. Who knows, right? But I enjoy chasing those rabbit holes and talking about just anything engineering and dev related, software engineering, right? I'm not going to be too good at structural engineering. I could talk electrical engineering. So I studied that in college for a bit. But anyway, we're going to be adding our no-op update, right? So this is our no-op update. And our no-op update is going to take a couple of things, right? We'll have the state already. So, and if we look, these two are the same. So the undo redo and the no-op handler, they're the same. Angular streaming crew, absolutely. We need to, we need to support each other. Angular has been getting a lot of very positive, very positive press lately, and even from some surprising places, which has been really cool. So yeah, we'll keep supporting each other. Absolutely. Nivek, if you wanna drop a link to your stream in the chat, go ahead. Feel free. And anybody here who's interesting a little bit too positive. Thanks for keeping us grounded. But we're looking at the update cell value has some stuff that we need to do with it, right? So we'll take a look at that. And then we need to take and then the current command index. So what we can do is here, we can just call this our updates. And I want to use an object for this instead of parameters to the method. And the reason for that is really if we need to add more in the future, it just makes it easier. It also makes it easier to make things partial. And that's really the only thing. It's kind of more, I kind of want to call it like a gut instinct. But yeah, that's really kind of what it is. So one thing we want to do is so this will be our cell update. And our cell update is last cell updated values. Is that right? We'll try. We'll see if Copilot picks it up, right? I'm not sure. I haven't looked, right? Update cell value. It doesn't tell us, but if we look up above, update cell value, their old commands. Well, that comes from another place in the store. And then the last thing we want to do is just next command index, we can call this, right? Next command index. That's just going to be a number. So these are our updates. It's interesting that it added the no op update. It's picking up right away that we need to patch our state. That's right. And that is correct, but the one piece it missed is our state. Oh, nope, there it is. And that's an interesting thing. But instead of that, we can do this. And this is the wrong type of update because we're grabbing values, right? And update cell value is not assignable to parameter of type that, right? Value, row, column. So we just put in the values. That's not the right. We want an optional value. We want a row. We want a column, and we don't even need the read only. Yeah. So really, we only need a few things, right? We need the value, we need the row, and we need the column. So we'll just put that in for right now. So our value is, this is going to be cell value. And then our row is going to be a number, and our column is going to be a number. And that's going to fix our issues here. It's interesting. Oh, never mind. Prettier is running. It's just taking a while for it to run. Sweet. This looks a bit. It is Signal Store. So this stream arc started back in September. We were originally using Component Store. Component Store has been completely removed, and we've moved over to Signal Store. Signal Store is going to be the wrapper that we use for xState. xState is, do I have? Oh, I don't. So let's take a look at xState, right? If we go to Stately UI, Stately AI, sorry. Stately AI has a bunch of things with it. But one of the biggest things is xState, right? xState is a way to handle state in your front end using state machines. The cool thing about xState is that it also, Stately UI gives us this editor. And I will need to figure this out later. But anyway, if we go back to the home page, this is kind of, well, this is the editor. So with the editor, we can visually draw our state changes, right? That makes sense, right? So, you know, this thermostat here has the ability to log temperature events, and when it logs temperature events, then it goes back into the, you know, consume readings. It's also logging the humidity levels, and you know, it looks like I'm basing this on the 36. This is probably every hour it generates a report, and then it goes back into the state, right? So it's state transitions. Yeah, it generates TypeScript code. And unfortunately, this is, you know, this is just an image. And I don't remember how I logged in. So I need to figure out what my account is. But yeah, using this visual editor, there are some cool things over here. Like you can simulate your state transitions. You can look at like the events, you can look at the details. You can get the actual source code and stuff up here, right? So it's generating all of this behind the scenes, and these could be opened as tabs or flyouts or things like that. And the cool thing about Stately, like xState and Stately AI is you can load the state machines at runtime. So, you know, if you want to potentially change the state machine, you could tell, you know, xState, hey, load this new state machine, and it will load it. It's got the, most of the state machines use JSON to define things about them, and then you've got, you know, your TypeScript or JavaScript code or things like that. Unnecessary complexity, yeah. Yeah, the Angular Plus show went over this, and you know, Michael shared this with me too. It's on my list of my backlog of things to watch, which grew quite a bit during the new year as a bunch of people shared things with me. And there's some really cool stuff you can do with it. We used it about a year ago now. And we used xState to, we wrapped it with component state, and we used it to update our, we built, a sample, sample video player. It was pretty basic. It didn't actually replay video and stuff like that, but that part would have been the trivial part. Once we got all of the state working with the fast forward, the rewinds, the pausing, the stop, the reset the stream, all of that stuff. Once you're at that point, it's just a matter of hooking it up to the object, right? Probably the HTML5 video, you hook it up to that, and then you can interface with it. So very, very powerful. And state machines are a good way to think about your code. Dad jokes, trolling, and nerd sniping has put Jason's plans back. Well, there's been that, but there's also been just like some personal stuff going on that I haven't been able to keep up the streaming schedule that I wanted. But things have settled down. We're into the new year, and we're getting back on track. We're almost there to where we're actually going to start adding xState. But yeah, the nerd sniping is real. And like I said, I chase squirrels, right? I'll chase rabbits down, rabbit holes and stuff like that. And I think it's, I enjoy it. I have a decent amount of experience in the programming industry, and I've got hopefully stories that are helpful to share with everybody. Streaming schedule is hard. It can be hard, right? Very much so, and I agree with you on that. And part of being an engineer is making sure that you're at your best, right? And you're avoiding burnout and things like that. And so you have to be very, very cognizant of how you balance your work life, right? And you have to recognize that things like streaming are work, right? Even though I enjoy it, there is a lot of work that goes into this. And so, yeah, and that is exactly. And I'll be honest with you, Nika or Nivek. Like, I'm to the point where I make some money, but it's not a lot. Like, I make maybe $50 every couple of months. Right? It's enough to basically pay for my subscriptions, but it's not more than that. For a couple of hours and just going through articles like Reddit posts, Angular articles from Twitch. Yeah, I make about $50 every couple of months from Twitch. If you've been streaming on Twitch for a while, you probably know that Twitch only pays out once you've made, at least $50 on the platform. And so I don't make a lot. And I don't intend to ever make a lot. I want to try to keep, my streaming focused more on the content and more on making things accessible to people. I've got my ads turned down as low as I can. I recognize that Twitch needs to pay for their platform, so I can't get rid of ads entirely. But I try to turn my ads down as low as I can. I try to create content. Like, all of my repos are going to be open source. You can find all of them on my GitHub. And my articles, I try to put them on platforms that aren't going to charge money, things like that. I just want things to be free and accessible to people. Yeah, in that I make my money only on YouTube. would be curious how that works because I don't want to be an affiliate and don't want to play ads. Exactly, right? Once you're an affiliate and becoming a Twitch affiliate takes a bit of work and a bit of focus. See, I don't make any money on YouTube. I don't have a big enough YouTube audience. And so because I started on Twitch, right? And moving your audience can often be difficult. You know, people are a little bit resistant to change. That's why I stream on 3 platforms now, right? I stream on Twitter, I stream on Twitch, and I stream on YouTube. Those 3 platforms, are where the majority of my viewers come from. I've been looking at potentially doing like an Instagram account also and streaming there. I've just been too lazy to really get into it, I'll be honest. Like I said, a lot of things have come up, and sometimes you just got to prioritize your sanity. So yeah, a little bit behind the stream. So Kevin Croix sounded familiar. Yeah. Oh, I should even. What's up, Kevin? We've talked before in the past. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for being here, man. I appreciate it. If you guys don't know who Kevin is, Kevin's an amazing pillar of the Angular community. You should absolutely check out his Twitch and his YouTube. And definitely check him out where his articles are, things like that. Want to do multi-streaming as well, but once you start playing music, it gets tricky with the very, very good point. And that's why I don't play music. I wanted to play music. I even looked into some of the royalty-free stuff, but to do the amount of stuff that music that you do for royalty-free, the licenses become a bit tricky. So they claim royalty-free, but then they have these weird licenses, right? And then it just gets crazy. So I hear you there. Yes, we were on the GDE channel. And like there's a whole bunch of things I'd like to do. It's crazy. So once you start streaming and creating content, it's crazy how many like designers come out of the woodworks and like message you like, hey, we can help update your site and things. I appreciate that. I don't have the budget for that, right? I'm not one of these big streamers out there that's got infinite budget. And I appreciate they need to make money, so I'm not gonna beat them up. I'm not gonna make fun of them. But just there's so many things out there that are set up that once you start creating content, there's so many people out there that want to be a part of that revenue stream, right? And they recognize that I'm not gonna make thousands of dollars, but what I can do is potentially become a part of all these different streams. And if I get 1,000 streamers paying me a couple bucks, now I'm making thousands of dollars, right? But there's just so many things like that. They just want $1 here, $1 there, and it just adds up, and it eats up anything that you've got. So I'm very, very careful about my budget with streaming. Hey, Marcus, someone should make coding streamer free music, but instead of a share license, you have to say Angular is the best. Love the idea, Michael. The toughest part of becoming a content creator is you essentially become your own business. But that means that you're legally responsible for the decisions that you make, right? And so suddenly you become very, very careful about the licenses and things that you take on. So we're a bit off topic here, but you know, sometimes it's worth talking about this kind of stuff because I know that there are people out there that are curious, like, how do I get into streaming? And you guys, if you have those questions, how do I get into streaming, things like that, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer questions like that. Um, I'm going on 3 years of experience now. So I wouldn't say that, I'm the most knowledgeable, but I do have some experience with it. And then, you've got people like Nivek also, and there are a couple of other people um, who visit the stream who are into streaming and do content creation regularly. And the nice thing about content creators is that we're always willing to discuss content creation. And you guys sniped me, so we're gonna tell a story. But at Monorepo World, the NX team hired a pretty famous streamer to come in and interview their staff and put together a documentary of sorts about NX, right? And we were in the lunch line one day, and I heard the producer and the content creator talking about video editing and stuff like that, and I just started talking to him. Right, here I am. I'm nowhere near the size, but we're talking. We're talking video editing. We're talking removing dead air and things like that from edited videos, and he gave me a whole bunch of ideas for AI tools that can help with that kind of stuff. And just shared content. That's the cool thing about most content creators that I've run into. They're very happy to discuss it with others and just share tips and tricks. So I'm so tempted to make a joke about Angular, but I won't. It's a challenge. Yeah, the hardest part of being an Angular streamer is being an Angular streamer. It's not um it's not wrong. I want to be a dev. Sometimes I like to, so where I live, there are a lot of React developers. And sometimes I enjoy just putting on like an ngconf t-shirt or some Angular logo or something and just going to lunch. Because the amount of comments that I'll get from doing that is it's enlightening. I find it fun to engage. It's a soft form of trolling. I'm not going to go out and fight people or anything like that. I like to hear their opinions. And the one thing that we're really good about as developers and in software engineers is we're really good at sharing our opinions. So if somebody goes out and wears a T-shirt, people are often going to comment on it, and it's a fun thing. But being an Angular developer can be because you've got the 800-pound gorilla in React, right? And you've chosen a framework that is definitely not that big, definitely nowhere near as big as React. And some people are definitely going to be like, "Oh, you're stupid," blah blah blah. Great, we move on, right? Those aren't the people I want to talk to. But there are people out there that are like, "Why did you do that?" Right? And that legitimately want to ask questions and legitimately want to share their beliefs and legitimately want to hear yours. And those are fun people to talk to. They also help me as a developer and engineer think more critically about what I'm doing, right? And I appreciate people who are willing to take the time to give me information so I can make better critical decisions, right? Critical thinking decisions. It can be more difficult being an Angular developer. We don't get the cool libraries. We don't get things like that. But your joke's actually not that far off. I've been recently doing Vue.js, loving it a lot. Honestly, I've been thinking that Vue.js is better than both React and Angular. Yeah, the Vue.js community is very passionate, and I think they have good reason to be, right? They're built on solid principles. They have very, very good leadership. It's an intelligently done framework. And I hear the same thing from a lot of people who start Vue.js. Why are there less Angular developers active on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter compared to other frameworks? I have a theory on that one, and a lot of it comes down to a principle that I was just introduced to. It's a fascinating principle, and it's often referred to as the tall poppy principle, right? And the reason it's called the tall poppy principle is it comes down to there was the way the story was told to me, and again, telephone game, right? So I could be missing some key details, but from my understanding, the way the story was told to me is there was a prince in one of the Greek city-states, and they wanted to conquer another city-state. So this prince went to their father, who was the king of the city-state, and asked their father, how can I best go about conquering this other city-state? And the father pulled his sword and walked over to a patch of poppies and, sliced off the tallest poppies, right? And the lesson the son took out of what his father did was that if he went into the other city state and he killed the most influential leaders and the people who stood out the most, right, he would destabilize the city state enough to to make them easily conquerable, right? And the lesson that psychology talks about from the tall poppy problem is don't stick your head up, right? If you stick your head up, you get noticed. And so there are a lot fewer people who want to stick their head up. And where there are fewer developers, there's fewer people willing to stick their head up, right? They even went into the saying in different cultures about there's a Japanese saying that the tallest nail gets hit. And Marcus, maybe you can provide some information. I can't remember what the Swedish saying was, but the Swedish saying had something to do about standing up above the others and not drawing attention. And in the U.S. we kind of have a similar saying where the squeaky wheel gets the oil, right? The person who makes the most noise often gets the most attention. For both good and bad reasons. But the concept of the tall poppy, right, is that most people are most comfortable going along with the group. They don't want to stand out. And so there are some very, very intelligent people out there who they don't want to stand out. So that's my thought on it. Angular developers are more millennial age. I think the Zoomers naturally bring my buzz and social media, and that's another potential thing, right? Is Angular developers tend to be they tend to work more in bigger organizations, right? More enterprise level organizations. They tend to be more mature developers. I'm not going to say that they are mature, but based on what they do and what they tend to do, they tend to be, maybe older developers. They tend to be, there are certain biases that go along with, people who are Angular developers, and that's very, Another wave of information is about PHP, that PHP is bad and old and should not be used. Yeah, PHP. PHP rightly earned that image back in the day. They have since fixed it. The problem with earning an image is it's very difficult to shake that image. That's why companies are constantly changing their names, right? They're trying to shake that image. And another wave is about Rust being the best language fast. Rust, that's the language I want to learn. and yeah, the tall poppy principle, like I like to look for my own cognitive biases, but I also like to learn about, psychology and how other people think. So the tall poppy principle, definitely one to look into. Um, very, very fascinating way to look at the world. And it's so my oldest daughter definitely suffers from the tall poppy principle. Um, and as parents, it's a little bit frustrating to watch because when she lets go and just allows herself to be herself, she tends to be a natural leader and she tends to, unite people and things like that. Unfortunately, high school is like a microcosm of the tall poppy principle, right? If you stand out, people beat you down quickly. And she's really struggling with that right now. Um, and it's very frustrating as parents to watch her, and we're like, hey, why didn't you do this? And she's like, well, nobody else does. It's like, well, yeah, leaders do what nobody else does. Um, and so having those kinds of discussions, it's been very eye-opening to learn about this. Yeah. If you look, yeah, modern PHP and Laravel are very good frameworks. I don't feel qualified to speak on them because I haven't used PHP since like version 5, because I had such a bad experience with version 5 that it's difficult for me to go back. So, right, they're still maintaining, in my personal view, they still have that same stigma that I attached to them back in version 5. They've since moved on, right? I think they're on version 8 now. So I try to be careful about the stigmas that I assign to them, even though my own personal biases are what they are. There's a lot of money to exploit that market and push that. Exactly. I want to be a developer. React, there's just so much money. And when you're picking a framework, right, if you want to have the biggest developer pool, React, right? So there aren't 10 frameworks based on Angular who are getting millions. Exactly. Very, very true. Right. There is one meta framework out there right now with Analog.js, an amazing meta framework. And Brandon has been doing incredible work with it. And we'll be doing some more stuff with Analog this year. And Spartan built on top of Analog is another amazing stack. So yeah, create libraries and meta frameworks, whereas Angular, being more out of the box, is more solved, not perfect or actually solved, but less to chase. There's another interesting aspect to Angular, Michael, that and you guys have sniped me really well. We're way off topic right now, but that's cool. I love it. There's another interesting aspect to Angular, and this is one that part of being a GDE and a content creator and things like that is I get to talk to people who are way smarter than me, who are working on open source projects that everybody uses, right? And there's an interesting perception in the Angular community that if something doesn't come from the Angular core team, then it's not part of Angular and it's not the Angular way of doing things. And so there are a lot of very smart people out there who have created libraries, but they get beaten up by the Angular community because, oh, you're not Angular. You're not the Angular way of doing things, right? And it's a very insular way of looking at the Angular community. And it actually is very frustrating to me because I would love for us as a community to embrace more creativity, more curiosity, and explore a bit more. I understand that, and this comes again from being more Angular, being more enterprise, used more in the enterprises, right? Enterprises are a lot more averse to experimenting, and when there are fewer devs, there are fewer people who are willing to experiment, and it's an interesting it's an interesting microcosm where we get fewer libraries because there are fewer people, but also because people are less likely to want to experiment. Um, yeah, I and that's all that we can hope for, Nivek, is that yeah, one day she will recognize the importance of being her own person. And as parents, we work hard to give her good principles, and then it's up to her to decide, is this a principle I want to hang on to or not? Um, the streamer agreed with me. So smart. Oh, dude, if I'm agreeing with you, you might want to rethink your positions. I don't know how smart I am, but anyway, about how there is more a focus on community built functionality and emphasis on that for this year. Analog.js took the heat so the team could start cooking on some. And that's the interesting thing, right? Is man, there's some behind the scenes things that I am aware of that I don't want to talk about. But because it's not my story to share. But I did talk to Brandon and Chow quite a bit during the days when, the alternate authoring and stuff like that. And they did take a lot of heat. They did take a brunt of the heat. And the interesting thing is that now that Angular is looking at that, because of the heat that, Brandon and Chow took, the Angular team doesn't have to take so much heat, right? And there are people that feel very passionate about their Angular framework, and we need those people, right? We need everybody. We need a diverse view of how the framework should be. If we all start moving the same direction, we start building momentum, and it's very, very difficult for us to recognize that, hey, maybe we're doing the wrong thing, right? As you get a more and more diverse view, it becomes more difficult to move in a direction, but at the same time, the direction is often a much better choice. So yeah. We should celebrate the people to try to push forward new ideas and new ways of doing things. Shout out to Chow and Brandon. Exactly. Chow and Brandon are amazing people. They're out there doing incredible things. And they're not the only ones, right? Kevin, I've seen your stuff. You're out there doing amazing things. You know, we've got the whole Angular architects, right? Those guys are out there doing incredible things all the time. We've got people on, like the Angular podcast and the Angular show are out there doing incredible things. There are a lot of people out there doing amazing things, right? It's easy for me to talk about people that I know and things like that, but the community's huge. And the community, there are lots of people in the community trying to make it better. And that's what I really appreciate. And it's on all sides, right? So lots of very, very passionate people. And I agree with you. We should celebrate. We should celebrate new ideas, right? And we may reject new ideas, right? Celebrating new ideas doesn't mean that we accept those new ideas, right? But fostering an environment where people feel free and empowered to experiment only makes us better. So people were going rabid over the first few teasers of theoretical off. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, if they hadn't done that first, I don't even know what it would have been like. Throwing in tons of stuff like TS parity and templates for start. Yeah, exactly. So from an outsider, I'm not sure how much more can Angular improve from a marketing or dev popularity standpoint. And that's a fair way to look at things, right? I want to be a developer. The interesting thing, right, is I've seen a bunch of frameworks come and go. right? I've seen Moo tools come and go, right? In the very beginning, server-side pre-processing was a lot of the way that you did interactive web applications, right? So PHP was huge back in the day. Everybody did it, but it had its problems and people didn't like it. And then along came things like Prototype and Moo tools, and they had their day, right? And then you had things like Knockout from Kendo, and then Angular came along, um, right? But over that whole period, like right after Moo tools and Prototype, you had jQuery, and jQuery was huge. Like jQuery was so massive that everybody was convinced that it would be around forever. Most of the internet still runs on jQuery. jQuery's everywhere. Even your Cypress stuff is running on jQuery, right? There's so much jQuery out there. Um, but nobody talks about jQuery anymore, right? And eventually, nobody will talk about React. Nobody will talk about Angular. Nobody will talk about Vue, right? And something new will come along and it will change the paradigm and everybody will move that direction. And that's one of the important things to remember is don't tie yourself to a framework, right? Says a guy whose stream is about Angular, right? And who's been doing Angular for a long time. But tying yourself to a framework is the wrong way to go. It can lead to scary situations where you're like, well, all I know is this. How do I react? How do I keep my job? So if you want to be successful as an engineer, learn a framework and get good at a framework that's going to pay your bills, right? But the best way to do it is keep developing as an engineer, as a developer, right? Keep your theoretical stuff. Keep learning that, right? Keep learning your design patterns. Keep learning, keep learning bigger concepts like onion architecture, DDD, things like that, right? Be aware of things like push-based and CQRS and things like that other paradigms that are out there and ways to look at the world. And it will help because the world will move on, but you will have a solid foundation where you can pick up the new vocabulary of the new framework or the new paradigm or whatever it is, because you're solidly grounded in solid principle engineering techniques. And when I'm saying solid here, I'm not talking about the solid solid principles. I'm talking more about just very, very foundational computer science type stuff. But yeah. Is that two meta frameworks and their attached businesses have healthy competition and beefs. And in the end, the winner is the underlying framework. And that's very true, Michael, right? When you can introduce competition, it tends to weed out the weaker ideas, and the stronger ideas tend to, right? It's the, it's the whole theory of evolution, basically, right? And it applies just as much to frameworks and meta frameworks as it does to animals and whatever else, right? The survival of the fittest is often a good framework to look at things. And jQuery syntax is not bad, right? The problem that jQuery syntax has is that it's very it's very declarative, right? You go through and you not declarative. It's very we'll just call it very non-functional, right? And not from a it doesn't work standpoint. It works amazingly well, but it doesn't. You as an author have to create your own framework on top of jQuery to make jQuery so that it doesn't become spaghetti. Part of my interest in Nest.js is diversifying into TS to a greater extent, but also backend. Yeah, and that, like, One of the best things you can do as a front end dev, um, if you're highly specialized front end, is to learn some back end. Right? Learn how APIs work. Learn how HTTP works. Learn about the underlying technologies that make our job possible. Because it opens up your mind to think about bigger and bigger issues. And you don't get stuck just thinking about, well, if I click this button, blah, 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 right? No, now you're thinking about the whole feature, and the button is only a small part of that feature, right? Whereas, in front end, we tend to think very, very front end and focus very, very front end. And rightly so. Like, if an application sucks, right? If people say an application sucks, the first part of the application that's ever blamed is the front end of the application, because that's what everybody works with, right? So if your application sucks, quote unquote, right, it's often the front end that's blamed, and it takes way more time for that scrutiny to make it to, like, middleware and back end type stuff. So we tend to be very hyper focused on what we do because we take the brunt of the complaints, right? So yeah, but I highly recommend, learning any kind of back-end technology you want, whatever. And again, there are frameworks out there that are good. There are frameworks out there that are bad. Learn what makes the most sense to you. And if you want to make money in it, maybe do some research into what's going to make you money. But the concepts that you learn are going to be universal, and the concepts that you learn are going to help you think about front end work too. jQuery 4 came out last year. Yeah, that's crazy. Only to send one file, and I have to work around send two files and say maybe I call them. Well, yeah, I mean, all frameworks have issues. Yeah, thank you for showing up, and thank you for the conversation. I really enjoy it. And Kevin, feel free to reach out anytime you want. I'm always happy to talk. So yeah. Anyway, we got pretty distracted. But let's get back to this, right? So we just added our no-op update. And now we could come in and we can replace this stuff with our no-op update, right? So we can just say state.noop update. And here our update value is going to be our command, and our next index is that, right? And with our undo, and this is part of the reason why I really like my AI helpers. In a lot of cases, they can get in the way, but here, right, it's able to understand, hey, my cell update goes here, my next command goes there. And we've updated everything. We're good to go. So let's go take a look at our game, right? So here, if I hit undo a few times and then I enter in a 1 and then I hit undo, boom, it works, right? So if I hit 1, 2, 3, I hit redo a few times, 4, 5, 6, and then if I hit undo, normally that 4 would have been stuck, but now we're in a good place. I am noticing that we've got an issue here. This is interesting that our pencil marks aren't working, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, undo. So the 6 came back, undo, the 5 came back, undo, the 4 came back, the 3 did not. it came back here and here, but it came back here, here, and here. It's not coming back in the actual cell. Fascinating. So we do have, why is that the case? So if I go 4, 5, 6, undo the 6, 4, 5, I come back and I do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, undo, the 9 comes back, the 8 comes back, 7 comes back, the 6 does not. Fascinating. Let's just go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Undo, undo, undo. So that one all worked, right? Because we can see they're all coming back. Undo here, the 6 does not come back, the 5, the 4. As soon as I do the 3, interesting. If I come over here and put a 1, I wonder if it has something to do with the row or, well, but it has to be the row optimization. Let's reset that and just take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And these are the pencil marks we've got some issues with, right? So we probably want to take a look at our pencil marks. There should be a 6 here, right? This 6 should be here. 5, so now this should be 5 and 6 here and here, and then 4, 5, 6. Like this whole row should be back. It should look very similar to what we're seeing down here. As soon as I undo the 3, all of this pops back, but we're interesting. Very interesting. So we're gonna have to take a look at the pencil marks. So some sort of index-based bug. I think so. If I go 9 to 1 bottom up, that's a good question, right? And so again, if we go 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we do the undo, the 1 comes back immediately, the 2 comes back, the 3. And so I think it has to do with an interaction between grid, with region and column. The 4, 5, 6. So again, as soon as the 7 comes, right, these start working. One thing to do is to test across, right? So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and if we undo this, do we see the same issue? So the 7, 8, 9 came back. Yeah. So it's very, very interesting because it seems to be localized to a region, right? This 9 square here. Well, here's another thing to test, right? So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we undo this, right? 9 comes back, 8, 7, 6 comes back, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This can't be 4, 5, 6, but this can be 7, 8, 9. And this can be 4, 5, 6. And here we need a 7, 8, 9. Here we need a 1, 2, 3. And here we can go 4, 5, 6, right? So now if we undo this, the 6 comes back, the 5, the 4. Great. Oh, Look at that. Oh, we've got even some weirder stuff going on here. Because at this point, the 7, 8, 9, like these cells should look the same. These cells should look, well, the same. No, they shouldn't. But these cells should definitely look the same, right? These are matching up. These are, but we still don't have our 7, 8, 9 there. And now this should have everything but 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. This should be everything. And these two should be everything but 1, 2, 3. So this should all match. So we've got some weirdness going on, right? Because this should be back to where it is. If I redo this, yeah, we've got some interesting issues going on with our interesting. So we'll definitely have to do some investigation here. But we fixed the issue with our state machine, and now we can take out our commented code. And it really came down to moving the update to the right place, and then even extracting the no-op update into the right place, right? And this allowed us to simplify a lot of our code. So, you know, it's always good to take a look at, you know, your refactors. And what do I want to say? I am against let's call it zealotry, right? In any I'm against zealotry in any ideal that you know, any, yeah, we'll call it any ideal, right? And what do I mean by zealotry? Zealotry basically means that I hold to that ideal, and I fight for that ideal at the expense of others. And, you know, why do I bring that up? One of the things that I see a lot in software development that often makes me worry is dry zealotry, right? And what do I mean by that, right? You guys have probably encountered this in your job many times before in your pull requests or your merge requests, right? You put something up, and one of the comments you get is somewhere somebody says, "Hey, this isn't very dry," right? And maybe you potentially copied code from somewhere and then modified it, or who knows what, right? And a lot of bad abstractions have been created in the name of dry, right? Don't repeat yourself. Dry is a useful principle, but it shouldn't be an overarching, you know, it shouldn't be an overarching rule. It shouldn't be something that, you know, drives your development. Dry is just a tool. And in fact, I subscribe to the wet, the wet belief system. Write everything twice, and sometimes more than twice, right? Because I don't think that you're going to get the abstraction right. If you try to create an abstraction the first time you feel like you need to copy code. Yeah. One thing that I like about not doing OOP is that I don't have to deal with the solid zealotry. And that's another one, right? Solid, like there's the cult of solid out there, right? That has created a lot of zealots, right? And you get people out there arguing about SRP, single responsibility principle, and they don't understand what SRP means, right? Most people will bash you over the head with solid, but then can't tell you what the L in solid stands for or what it means, right? I also subscribe to another point of view, the Cupid principle. But again, they're principles that I like to follow, but they're not something that I want to bash somebody over the head with. If I feel like somebody's doing something and they would benefit from understanding the principle, then I'm happy to explain it to them. And in an MR, I like to go in and learn as much as I want the person that I'm reviewing to learn. So I like to have discussions in MRs. And I'm always willing to be wrong with my comments, right? And I'm quick to recognize that somebody understands that code better than I do, and they may see things that I don't see. So yeah. Michael says, I used to be a dry zealot. Now if I do a PR and there's bigger fish to fry, I just say, please add a comment of where something was copied from. And one place where I'm 100% anti-dry is in unit testing, right? Unit testing code has to be maintained. If we go out of our way and we create these ridiculous abstractions to be dry in our unit tests, and those abstractions require more maintenance than just copying and pasting my unit tests, you failed, right? If your abstraction is difficult to understand or maintain, or requires me to understand your abstraction more than the code that I'm trying to test, then we failed in our unit testing. And dry has led to a lot of weird abstractions like that. So I agree with you. Being a dry zealot is just not the right way to be. I've subscribed to the web principle, write everything badly. Well, that's just my natural state of being. I want to be a developer. Single responsibility principle. When you tell them to do the dishes. SRP. Like the amount of times I've been beaten over the head with somebody screaming SRP when they weren't talking about SRP. It screams a bit of when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? SRP. SRP is a valuable principle, but it does not mean often what people think it means. I would love to dig into it more. I don't have the information ready right now to really dig into it, but what people think SRP means versus what it actually means are often two different things. Usually when people are screaming SRP, they're talking about your functions, and a lot of times they're right, but not for the reasons that they think they're right. And so yeah, we'll leave it at that, right? Open closed is another one that often gets misunderstood. Yeah. I log onto YouTube and I see people having videos with 500K views about React using solid principles. It's crazy. React cannot even implement a lot of these principles because it's not OOP. And so there are, solid is definitely based around OOP, but you can apply a lot of the solid principles, even though it's not OOP, to functional programming, because functional programming will still use objects, and things like Liskov, right, where if I replace something with something else, then it should be a one-to-one replacement. I shouldn't have to worry about things like that. That works, right? Single responsibility, kind of, right? Open closed, that one's a little bit more tricky, but you could even argue for that one. And here I am complaining about solid, and I don't even remember what all of this stuff means, right? So yeah. Yeah. Uh, so it was interesting because I learned this principle from a good friend of mine. His name's Austin. He works at NX. And when he moved to NX, he started helping with the Lerna repository. And we had some amazing discussions about unit testing when he moved over there, because he and I had similar ideas that, hey, we should make testing as simple as possible. We should be building abstractions on top of our tests. And then he went and started working with James Henry at NX, and James felt very, very differently. And the principles that I learned there is that from the tests, I should be able to learn what your code is supposed to do, right? If I look at your tests and I can't understand what your code is supposed to do, your tests are bad, right? Your abstraction is bad. And that's when it became apparent to me that tests should really be a step-by-step instruction of how to work with your code. And that's what I really appreciate about people who write good tests. Like when I go into the Angular repository and I'm struggling to understand something, I go look for the tests for what I'm trying to understand. And the tests will often show me how to use what I want to use. Yeah, totally agree with you on the idea that solid. So yeah, that's a good one. I want to be a developer. Those principles are so vague, you can spend hours debating them. You just made me think about like horoscopes, right? And how, you know, a lot of future predictions are based around being so vague that you could argue them for hours. And we're really good at that as engineers, right? We're really good at making statements that are vague enough, right? Have just enough truth that they're okay, but they're vague enough that we give ourselves the ability to back out, right? So that's a very insightful. You know, solid is a lot like a fortune cookie. Maybe that's a T-shirt we should make. What is SRP in React? A component that you can implement in more than one page or feature. You can create a complete over abstraction system where you're doing 10 steps instead of 3 because you want everything to be reusable. And that's, yeah. And SRP, right, is single responsibility. Like in Cupid, SRP is the U in Cupid. In Cupid, it's the Unix principle, is what it's called. And the Unix principle is that you create small things that do things well that can be composed, right? That's the Unix principle. And you see this on the command line all the time, right? Where you have things that you pipe into other things that you pipe into other things, and those things do things really, really well, right? Like you may pipe curl into, you know, maybe a grep command that you pipe into something else, right? And each of those commands do things very, very well, but they don't do more than what they say they do, right? And that's what SRP and the Unix principle really means, is that you create something that does something very, very well that can be cohesively composed with other things in your code, right? It's going to work wherever you put it. That's the idea behind SRP and the Unix principle, is that you create something that very, very small, does something very, very well, and can be used over and over again, right? But to your point, most abstractions don't work that way. Most abstractions require a whole bunch of setup, and then they work, right? And everybody's like, SRP, 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 right? But that's not SRP. You've just made a bigger mess, to your point. Dry, yeah, and dry is another mess. Tests are a great way to read Angular PRs. Exactly. Tests are good. Who am I kidding? We do not do tests, and that's my biggest problem, and that's where I want to get today. So we've got a bug, and the bug is with our pencil marks. So maybe that's where we start, right? let's start testing our pencil marks and see what could potentially be our issue. So let's go ahead and just close all of this. And let's pull up our pencil marks. And we want to test this feature and make sure this feature works, right? So how do we go about doing that, right? We have no tests, so we don't even know if it works. We have the grid store that we commented out a whole bunch of stuff. So we'll want to take a look at this stuff too. Let's take a look at our grid store. Actually, before we do that, let's just make sure that we commit everything, right? And here we can just say that, hey, we fixed a bug when undo or redo clicked with nothing to do, right? So we've got that fixed. I'm actually probably going to merge this branch in, which is crazy. It's been a branch that's lived since September. But let's take a look at our pencil marks, right? And we need tests for our pencil marks. Let's go ahead and create a new TypeScript file. And this TypeScript file will be pencil-marks dot feature spec.ts, right? So now we've got our feature file. If we take a look at like our grid store, we set up, you know, a service factory and things like that. We're going to have a bit of a problem if we do that with our store feature, right? Because if we look at our pencil marks feature, it's not injectable. So we need to create something that's injectable, and we need to use that in our tests, right? So how do we go about doing that? So what we can do is we can describe, right? And this is our pencil marks feature. And maybe we should just call this with pencil marks, right? With pencil marks. And we'll call this our feature, right? So there we go. So let's think about some tests that we think it should do, right? It should set row pencil marks. Does pencil marks feature have the ability to set row? It does. And then column, and then region also. Hey, thank you for the following, Tiny DN. I really appreciate it. It means a lot. But yeah, come on in, join the conversation. You know, we've been having good conversation today. It's been a lot of fun. So thank you for the follow, and definitely feel free to, you know, just jump on in and say hi. Anyway, so we do have the ability to update row pencil marks. We do have the ability to update column and region. So we may be able to tease out our bug here. It should be able to set row pencil marks and column pencil marks. So we're doing a little bit of, I don't know, red-green refactor maybe, but we've already written the code, so it's not really, right? We aren't doing test-driven. We aren't doing TDD or anything like that. But we do have the arrange, act, and assert stuff in place, so we can set up our tests. We need to arrange a test so that we can so we can set up our pencil marks, right? So how do we arrange so that we can, set row pencil marks? Well, our test requires a couple of things, right? We require a grid state for this to work. So we may have to create some sort of grid state. So we're using Jasmine for our tests here. Sorry, not Jasmine. My goodness. I saw the J. I was like, Jasmine. No, we're not using Jasmine or Karma. Oh, this is another thing I wanted to fix. Let's go take a look at this really quick, and then we'll come back. We're using Jest. I haven't used Jasmine or Karma in a while, and Jest is a good one. I don't know. I haven't found the need to use Jasmine or Karma in a long time. And Angular is actually making some changes to where the testing framework won't matter as much. And if you guys saw a comment before Christmas that Brandon Roberts made about, hey, it would be nice if we could access the Angular compiler from a meta framework, because then we could just access the compiler and do stuff with the compiler, and it would make it easier to do things like testing frameworks or Vite or things like that. And Miko's like, we could definitely look into this, right? So the Angular team, I think, is trying to remove dependencies, and this is me speculating, right? This is entirely Jason's own speculation. It has, I just want to be clear that, right, this is me speculating. But I really feel like the Angular team is trying to move these hard dependencies on things like Webpack or ESBuild or Jasmine or, Jest or, things like that, and giving us the tools where we can implement our own stuff, which is exciting because there are tools out there that I would love to use, but they would require hooking into the Angular compiler, and there's not an easy way to do that right now. If that becomes a possibility, then we can start doing some really cool stuff. Yeah, RxJS, right? Dependencies on RxJS. They're definitely looking at those dependencies too. That's a good call out, Michael. But anyway, cellcomponent.scss. When we first looked at this, I didn't read the error message too much and didn't realize what was going on. What the error message is actually telling me is, hey, you've got this property below a nested property, right? This nested property where I'm adding box sizing. Putting the color property below that works in Sass because of the way, Sass and CSS, but it won't work once they move to the CSS nesting. So if I do that, that should go away. So we'll just close everything down, and we'll re-execute. We shouldn't see that warning. And reading through it, right? Declarations that appear after nested rules will be changed, and then it just says to keep the existing behavior, move the declaration above the nested rule, right? Otherwise, you can wrap it in this. Well, I didn't want to wrap it, and the error message was good enough that I understood it. And guess what? We don't have that error message anymore after we restart. So there we go. So let's go. Fixed compiler warning, right? Let's go ahead and push that. And then the last part is we'll go ahead and add this, adding tests for pencil marks. So at the bare minimum, our feature should be able to set row pencil marks and should be able to set column pencil marks, right? So how do we want to go about doing this? And this is where we should take a look at a little bit of an abstraction, right? Because our signal store feature expects a state that's a grid state, and then it expects some props, right? And then we want to be added to that, right? Our with pencil marks. So what we can do is we can say, hey, we can say const, and here we can say, you know, our test state equals, we want a signal store. Signal, come on. There we go, signal store, right? So go ahead and import that. And inside of here, we're going to need some state. But we want to add with pencil marks, right? We need to import this, and for some reason things are a little bit slow right now. So here's our with pencil marks, right? The next thing we can do is now we've got something that's injectable, right? Our test state is injectable. So we can now, if we go take a look at like our grid store, right? We're using spectator. We can use spectator here, right? So we can create a service factory that provides that service, and then our tests will be easier to write. If we go back to our pencil marks here, we can just say, hey, const create service equals, and again, we can use the same thing here, right? Create service factory. So we can just say, hey, create service factory. And our service factory is going to have our service that will be our test state, right? Boom. So we've got most of our stuff done, and we can close this so that we can see stuff. But our with pencil marks is complaining, right? Because we're missing grid state, we're missing rows, columns, regions, and last updated signal. And if we take a look at our pencil marks expect that stuff to be there, right? So we need a way to feed this stuff in. And this is where things get interesting, right? So one thing we could do if we wanted to, right, is we could have brought in, you know, our grid store. But we don't want to test our grid store. We want to isolate with pencil marks. So one thing we can do is we can say, hey, with state, right? So we can bring in our state. And in our with state, we can just say, hey, right now our grid is just an empty array. Boom. And now it's just saying, hey, now we're missing rows, columns, regions, and last cell updated, right? One thing we could also do here is we could take a look at our create grid state. And for whatever reason, we're slow right now, right? And this is going to create a grid state for us. Let's go take a look at what create grid state returns. It returns a cell state, ... So I think for, we can just say grid that creates cell state, does it not? And now we're good, right? So the last thing we want to do is have a couple of props. And we want to take a look at those props. Yeah, signal store tests are often quite easier, right? So we could actually just add with props, right? And we can bring this one in. Come on. So there we go. And our props can be pretty simple too. We can just say, hey, our rows are really, we could even just say, because if we look, our rows that it's expecting needs to just be a signal of cell state. So one thing we can do is we can create a row signal if we wanted. But for right now, really, we can just do a just.function, right? And am I using with props wrong? This is one that I haven't used too much. Okay, so it needs to be a function that returns props. Okay. There we go. And then columns can be a just function, and then regions can be a just function. And what's the last thing we're missing? Argument of type signal store feature this. Parameters of type store incompatible. Type grid signal cell state is missing the following properties from type. So it's complaining that I'm missing selected next to focus game one, creating puzzle mode, and has errors. But we can add those, right? So if we look, I need selected. So I can just say, hey, selected is a just function. Actually, I don't even need that. I can just say selected is false. On my signal store, so next to focus game one, creating puzzle mode and has errors. So next to focus is undefined, creating puzzle mode is false. And what are the other ones I'm missing? Game one and has errors. So game one is false and has errors is false. So now it doesn't like this because what does this mean? Has error. Oh, I called it has errors. Oh, wait. So selected can just be undefined. Boom. Because it's not a true or false here. And this types of props are incompatible. Oh, last updated. And this is where we can just go const last cell updated equals new subject, right? So we're just going to create a subject. And the reason we want a subject and not a behavior subject is we don't want our tests to we don't want tests to bleed. So now we can just say last cell updated here, and that should add that prop. And so now if we want to do last cell updated, we can do a next on it. We're going to have to do some more cleanup here as we work through the tests, but I want to just get a framework in place that we can use and then go forward from there. So it's saying argument of type this, state, grid state, props, this, method, this is not assignable to parameter of this, this, this. Types of parameter store incompatible, type this is not assignable to type this. Type inner signal store, blah, blah, blah. The types of props dot rows are incompatible, is not assignable to, oh, that's too bad. So this is where we need to, we're going to have to think about things just a little bit. Because we don't want our stuff to bleed, but we want to be able to control rows. So for right now, what we can say is, hey, rows equals, and here, actually, we don't need to do this. Just a function dot returns. They're not returns. Right, so mock return value. So for right now, what we'll do is we'll just do our const rows equals, and we'll just say signal that. Right, so now we can just say, hey, we've got rows. We'll do the same with columns, and we'll do the same with regions. But we've got some test leaks here. And regions. And the reason we've got test leaks, and one thing I can do is just shut this down. So we don't need our build running while we're doing our tests. But part of the problem we've got is these are going to leak, because if I set rows, if I do, in this test right here, I just do rows dot set, and I set some rows. Right, I do 1, 2, 3 for whatever reason. Any test that runs after this is going to have rows set to that value. So we do have some test leaks. So we'll have to address those test leaks. But let's get our test working. And then we can move forward from there. So in our arrange part of this, we need to create our service. So we can say, hey, const test service. Well, we can even just call it service, right? Equals create service. And that's going to create the service factory. So now we've got a factory with test state. One thing we could do is we could add some stuff here, right? So we could move this stuff into our create service factory. Boom. And now we've got these rows, but our create service factory could also We can create our test state here. And we need to change this just slightly. We can just say const create test state equals, and here we can just do rows, columns, props. And there we go. So that now here we don't need that anymore. And it's not props, it's regions. So that works. So here, now we've got our rows, our columns, and our regions. And our service is now going to be create test state rows, columns, and regions, right? And now our service, if we look, well, what does our create? It returns nothing, right? Because what we want to do is we want to return, and inside of here, our service is that, and then we can also return our rows, columns, and regions. And what this will do is now we create these signals every time we call create service. So every test will have these rows, columns, and regions in it. And we're going to have to fix up our typing, right? Because our rows needs to be a signal. I think it's cell state. Boom. Boom. I believe that's what it is. And our columns is the same. Signal, cell state, that. And our regions is also the same. Signal, cell state, that. So there we go. And so now we've got a service that we can use to create our cell state. This doesn't work anymore, but we can now destructure service out of here, right? And so now our service is a factory. Which we can solve by calling it here. Oh no, that's not where we want. That doesn't make sense. We want to call the factory. Right, so now our service is actually a service that has it's basically a signal state, right? So there we go. We've now got our service. And the nice thing about this is if I want to mess with grid or rows or anything like that, I can just grab rows. And now I can confidently go rows.next, right? And I can, and it's not next. It's rows.set, right? And now I can put some cell states in here, right? And so now I can get access to rows, but I can also guarantee that I'm not leaking rows. Is it me or signal source tests? Yeah, I just got a PR with tons of tests for an NGRX toolkit feature. I'm not that good at testing and definitely did them to the world's league, but it was quite approachable. That's really cool. Very, very cool. NGRX toolkit, that's really cool. Anyway, so now we've got our service. So we need to take a look at what we should do with pencil marks, right? So it wants to get the cell values to hide from the row. And then on the grid, it wants to map the values to hide to a row with the cell values to hide. And then the changed grid equals, we create, we create a new grid, and we insert the row into the grid. And then we patch the state with our changed grid. So what we can do is we can feed in our own row and see what happens, right? So what we would like to do is we would like to set the pencil marks, right? But what actually calls set pencil marks? And the set pencil marks is called from our last cell updated, right? So what we want to do is we need to feed a value into last cell updated. But we need our rows. I'm gonna have to think through this some more. Because last cell updated is the way we come in. Maybe a lot of the stuff I did doesn't make sense. We could do with grid, game one, manage selected, create puzzle mode. Those would all be there. And then pencil marks would be the one we wanted to test. So maybe a lot of what I did here doesn't make sense. let's back up just a little bit. So instead of doing a with state, and we might do some with state here in the future, but we could just go with grid because we need the rows, values, and stuff, right? And does that actually satisfy everything I need? Um, create service factory. Oh, I need create service equals create service factory. Boom. And last cell updated. So now my service can just be create service. Boom. And now I just need a way to update rows, right? So we look at the tests here. Do we have any related to? Oh, and I need to change that to be spectator. So no cell of focus. So with our store, with our with grid, so we've got the grid computed in here. Methods, update cell value. Set grid values. This is what will allow us to set the grid values and allow us to, or we can do the set cell value. So that's the one that we can use to help with our test. And this is not that, it's our spectator. It's what's watching our services. So here we can say, hey, spectator dot service dot, and here we can say, hey, set our cell value. And we want a 1. And our cell value takes an object, right? And it's telling us, hey, we need cell state, right? So we need valid, read-only, row, column, and stuff like that. But I think we have a create cell state. Is that not? Yep. So we can create a cell state, and in our cell state, we can pass it certain things, right? So we want to change, we'll say we want to change row 0, column 0 to a 1, right? And we're probably missing something here. When am I switching to NeoVim? I looked at it actually recently. I saw some stuff that was like, maybe I should do this. Oh, I need region on this. So my region should be 0, and that should handle it. So there we go. So now we've set the cell value for our create cell state, right? We've set this to a 1. So the next thing to do is we need to make sure that the rows, the row has the right pencil marks. And so service, I think I can just grab grid off of the service, right? And this test should fail and give us an idea, because really the row values to hide should be that. And we could even go, right, row 0, column 1. So the row values to hide should be 1. And if this works, so pnpm exec nx affected -t, or actually let's do exec nx run, and this is, the pencil mark feature is in components. So we can do components test and -- watch to make sure that we're watching the tests, right? And we'll see if this test actually works. All the legacy cache stuff, we can also take a look at that. Also, NX provides a really easy way to move to flat files. So we expected 3, we received 1. We expected that, we received that. So is it 1, 0? Is this column and then row? So it should set that. We're going to tell it to only run failed tests for right now. So on my grid, with grid computed, does that not have, that's got selected next to focus, rotated grid. So there's my rows. It's saying rows. It's not recognizing rows. Why doesn't it recognize rows? Oh, because it's here. So it should be rows 0, and we can go 1 here. Dot row values to hide. Boom. So we're not getting the update. Let's just console.log rows 0. Let's just see what row 0 looks like when we run our test. Interesting. So row 0, column 0, region 0 has a value of 1. It doesn't have anything set in the row values to hide. So we found our bug. Because if we look, like column 3 is the next row over. So this is most definitely our bug. We've got our row values to hide. And in fact, we've got our region values to hide here. We don't have our row value. You're gonna give me your config underscore make signal store properties private. Yes, that's true. But does it also make things private to test? Yes, it does. So like, say I come in here and I try to access. Let's try an underscore. We'll try set row pencil marks, right? And we're not going to call it. We're just going to try and access it. But notice right away, it already doesn't know what it is because it doesn't exist on the type, even though it's been added. So that function isn't there. But if I tried to force it, it would actually throw an error telling me that this is a private property and can only be used inside of a store. Yeah, Vim motions. I've been watching some stuff about Vim motions. They look really cool. NeoVim users, when I share, be quiet about NeoVim for 5 minutes config with. So yeah. Anyway, so I think I know what the issue is. And it like our unit tests are helping us fix some issues, right? So we can see that the row values to hide are set here in all of the regions outside of the region where I expect it to be, right? So region 0, column 0, we have region values to hide. And row 0, column 1, we have region values to hide. And row 0, column 2, we have region values to hide. But everything else has row values to hide. Both row and region values should be there. And so I want to take a look at our pencil marks feature. And it really comes down to the order that we're running this stuff in. Because we should also have column updates. And I'll bet if I comment this out, so if I comment this out, I'll bet we have issues with just the first item. So now if we look, we've got row values, row values, row values, row values, where we all expect row values. Now we've got region values. Why do we still have region values? I was expecting column values. Because that's not the latest one. This one is. So row values, row values, row values, row values, row values, row values, and column values. Yes. We know our problem. So the issue is we can't read the state here because what we've done is we've read the state, right? We've read the updated row, we've read the updated column and the updated region, and then we're passing them in, but we're calling this after we've updated. And so this doesn't know about any updates here, so it's overwriting them. And this doesn't know about any updates here or here, so it's overwriting them. So what we need to do is we need to take this out. And we don't want to pass it in. Instead, we need to read it at the time of set row pencil marks. So we do need to pass in the row number. So this can just be a number. And now this, and this can be the updated row. So down here, I just need to pass in the row, right? So that we know which row to read and we're good to go. So here, updated column, we need to pass in the column. Then we'll make the same change up above. So the updated column, we put that there, and this becomes a number. And Then we get that one, we get the next one, and the next one. And we change this to be updated column. Boom. Whoops. Ah. And this just needs to be cell.column here. There we go. And then got too many M's. So updated region needs the row and the column. So we'll grab those and then we'll move our updated region up. Boom. And this becomes row, which is a number, and column, which is a number. There's our updated region. We grab that one, we grab that one. And that should fix another bug. And this is the, this is the nice thing about unit testing is, there we go. So now we path, right? And if we look, we're no longer getting the weird behavior, right? Because now we've got row values to hide and column values to hide set. Row values to hide, column region values to hide, right? Row and region. And then here we've got row, row, row. So the bug we were seeing before with the weird region behavior has gone away. And we'll be able to verify that in the actual game when we're in using it. And this is the power of going in and unit testing your code, right? And this is the nice thing about using a store is that we can verify the way the store works. And by doing that, we can by verifying the way the store works, we can guarantee that the things behave as we would expect them to, right? And we can track down bugs, and we can do it in a way like the undo redo button. We're showing that there was an issue, but we didn't really know what the issue was. We could see it in the pencil marks, but it was difficult to know what it was. The other thing that I would do here is I would do for well, actually, I would do spectator service dot rows, and here I would grab row 0, and I would do a for each. And here we want our cell. So we want to verify that every cell in our row has the proper setting. And so now if we go through, again, we should pass. And to do that, I have to turn off that. And now it's going to run everything. And I broke it. How did I break it? There's an unhandled error event. So there we go. So now all of those are passing, so our row works. One thing I would like to do is just set a couple of values here. So we can, so let's set like 1, 4, and 9, right? And when we save this, we should get a bunch of errors. Well, actually, we're setting the same thing. So row 0, column, I don't know, 4, and column 8, right? And they just happen to match up. But now our test should fail again. So see, we're getting 1 and 9. But we only asked for 1. I'm curious why we're getting only 1 and 9. So we expected the 1, but we got a 9 also. What we really should be getting is 1 and 4 and 9. So we are setting them to 1, 1, 4, 1, 4, 9. So there we go. We can see even in the logging that it is setting the pencil marks how we would expect it to be. So, you know, now we're able to see and verify that our row works, and this solves a big issue that we were having. And we can actually copy the same test, right? And this is, you know, some people might be tempted to create an abstraction here. And the other thing is I'm just going to take out these. But what we want to do is we're going to set the row 0, column 0, that's fine. But here we want row 4, column 0, right? And row 8, column 0. And the regions don't matter as much, which is fine, but we expect row.column values to hide to equal that. But here, now we want to change this to be the first column, right? And this should pass also. Once it runs. So it's only showing the row pencil marks. And the nice thing is that the way we've set this up, we get a new grid every time, right? And we get new pencil, like, so, you know, we don't have to worry about stuff. Row. Yeah, okay, I get it. Yep, row. But yeah, so we've now got, and I need to end. But we've got our rows and our columns tested. Next time we'll come back and we will test our region pencil marks. But the nice thing about this is that by doing this, we're treating it like a black box, but this hook we're testing, right? Because the only way for our rows and our columns and our regions to be updated is through this update method. So we know our init hook works. We know, our other private methods work, and we're treating our test like a black box. We don't know what's going on. Nowhere in my tests am I saying that I expect a certain thing to be called, right? I'm interacting with the state in the same way that I would expect somebody else to interact with it, right? So I'm telling it, hey, set the cell value to 1 for this specific cell, set it to 4 for this one, 9 for this one. And then I just say, hey, in my rows, I expect this to be the way it should be, right? And hey, thanks. 24-hour stream. Oh, I have to go back to work tomorrow. I've been off for 2 weeks. I have to go back to work tomorrow. I couldn't do a 24-hour stream tonight. It's possible I may do one for like one of the charity events. I don't have a big enough following where it would make that much money, but I still, I still may consider a 24-hour stream. We'll see. That seems a bit crazy. I really have to think about the logistics of it. But yeah, you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Hopefully you guys all had a happy new year. I had a great break, had a great new year. I'm looking forward to the upcoming year. I will be back on Tuesday. We'll finish up testing the pencil marks. We've got just this last thing to do. And then we've tested our pencil marks and verified that they work. We've also fixed a bug. So that's a big win for us. Yeah, people would have to take turns nerd sniping me across time zones. People could actually watch me at normal times, right? For them. Anyway, you guys have a great week. If you're returning to work, hopefully it goes well. Hopefully your new year is awesome.